Some stories aren't told, they're buried, hidden in hushes, locked behind doors that should have stayed shut, and only whispered when the night is just right. A boy in an iron mask, locked away where the chains still rattle, and the air still smells like smoke. Lights that hover, vanish, and the people they bring back aren't quite the same. Tonight, we're exploring disturbing stories sent in by listeners. They say these stories are true. Believe them or not, that's up to you. Welcome to Whispers After Dark, where the shadows speak and the night listens. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what waits in the dark. Our first story is The Boy in the Iron Mask. I used to work salvage and restoration for the county. Most of the jobs were standard: condemned properties, collapsing barns, a few mold-ridden Victorians. We'd go in, photograph what was left, remove anything salvageable, and then mark it for demolition or restoration. Sometimes we found old journals, artifacts, or things best left buried, but nothing prepared me for a place I will just refer to as Deadwater. It sits at the edge of Black Hollow, up on a hill that overlooks what used to be an old mining route. The building's been abandoned since 1981, following a fire that gutted half the west wing. Officially, the cause was electrical. Unofficially, the town pretends it never existed. There are stories, not just about the patients or the cruel experiments whispered about in files no one can find, but of a presence far older than the asylum itself. Some say the ground was cursed long before the foundation was poured. Others blame the strange disappearances over the years. Not just patients, but hikers, surveyors, even a paranormal investigation team, on something called the Hollow One. A tall figure, gaunt, always watching. They say it moves through the trees with spidery limbs and hollow eyes, its mouth open in a scream no one hears until it's too late. But this story isn't about that thing. Not exactly. We were contracted to document and assess what was left of the West Wing before demo crews arrived. I was assigned the upper floor, once used to isolate violent or unusual patients. The place was nearly collapsed in on itself, but parts still stood. I climbed the stairs alone, the building groaning under my weight, and something about the silence up there hit different. Not the usual decay. This was still, heavy, like the hallway was holding its breath. Most of the doors were torn off or rotted through. Water damage, mold, broken furniture. Then I found room 309. Its door was still intact, iron reinforced, hinged shut from the outside, not to lock someone out, but to trap something in. The nameplate had long since rusted over, but I saw something scratched below it, 5 words etched deep into the frame, barely visible. Do not let him out. I didn't plan to open it, but the latch was already loose, hanging like someone had been there before. Inside, the room was nearly pitch black. My flashlight barely cut through the haze. Dust spun in the air like it was breathing, and on the floor, chains and claw marks. Hundreds of them, all at ankle level, like a child or someone crawling had been trying to drag themselves to the door. Some looked fresh. I backed out fast. Didn't say anything to the others, just logged the room, tagged it condemned, and told the salvage crew to skip the floor entirely, then handed the paperwork over for demolition. That should have been the end of it. But that night, when I got back to my motel in town, I found something outside my door, a piece of old iron, bent, rusted, and shaped like part of a mask, still wet with something red at the edges. The next day, I was assigned to help assess a row of condemned cottages near the edge of Black Hollow, just off the old service road that used to lead to Deadwater. They were the former homes of the doctors and staff who had once worked at the asylum. The first cottage looked untouched, no footprints, no signs of anyone having entered in decades. I took the lead on it. Nothing inside but moldy furniture, rusted cans, and a refrigerator with its door hanging open like a broken jaw. The second cottage was another story. I found a back room with a rusted lock barely holding on. The door opened with a hard shove, and inside was what had once been an office. I guess curiosity got the better of me. I opened a few desk drawers. Most were empty or stuck. One in particular wouldn't budge, so I jerked it a couple of times until it came loose. Inside, shoved all the way to the back, was a stained old manila file folder. I pulled it out and opened it under the beam of my flashlight. Inside was a single patient report. No name, just this. Male. Estimated age 9 to 11. No verbal communication. Found chained in crawl space after fire. Iron mask fused to jaw. Eyes unresponsive. Still breathing. The rest of the file had been blacked out, but not before I saw enough to know he had been accused of horrific things. Things no child should ever be capable of. Behind the file cabinet, partially obscured by a collapsing wall, was a door I hadn't noticed at first. Heavy, metal, sealed with a thick iron bar across the front. I know I should have left it, but I couldn't help myself. I pried the bar loose. It shrieked as it lifted, stiff from years of rust. The room beyond was small, almost like a private cell. The air inside was dry and wrong. On the cot, long rusted chains, and on the cracked mirror above it, a crude drawing done in what looked like soot or something darker. A child's figure. No face. Just a round head and the jagged outline of an iron mask studded with rivets. And scrawled beneath it, in the shaky, uneven handwriting of a child, were 3 words, "I'm still here." I didn't breathe. Somewhere in the back corner of the room something scraped against the floor. The rattle of chains echoed across the tile. I backed out fast and slammed the door shut, jamming the bar back in place. I radioed the others, gave the order to burn it to the ground. No salvage, no report, no pictures, just ash. I stood there and watched the fire crawl up the walls, and then I heard it. A scream, not human. High, sharp, unearthly. A sound like metal on bone. Then silence. Just the flames. Later that week I started asking around town, the diner, the gas station, the hotel lobby. Most people changed the subject. Some walked away. But one man, old, maybe late 80s, was sitting alone at the diner and overheard me talking to the waitress. He motioned me over, said he worked maintenance at Deadwater back when the fire happened. We talked over coffee, a lot of it, and what he told me made my stomach twist. He said room 309 was real, hidden. Not on any map. Staff didn't go near it. Patients refused to talk about it. And when the fire started, it began in the east. But the worst of it, the place that burned hottest and fastest, was right above 309. Then, as I got up to leave, he grabbed my wrist, grip strong despite his age. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Some say the fire wasn't an accident. They say it was the only way to seal it. Not just the boy, but what he brought with him." I found that while the people of Black Hollow will reluctantly talk about Deadwater, they don't like to mention the Hollow One. Most won't even say the name. Many still believe it's out there. The tall figure in the woods, the whispers in the trees, the dead limbs lining the old asylum drive. Whether the boy and the Hollow One were connected, I don't know, and honestly, I don't want to. Our next story was shared with me some time ago by a woman I'll call Missy. The names have been changed to protect the family, but the events, as she remembers them, are very real. It begins with strange lights in the sky, a missing girl, and a silence no one could explain. My name is Missy. I don't remember the exact year. Just that I was little, 4, maybe 5, so it must have been 1954 to 1955, and we were living outside Fort Polk in a small Louisiana town that doesn't even show up on most maps. My daddy was a preacher. My mama worked as a nurse on base. We didn't have much, but we had each other. That was enough. It was sometime after midnight when the phone rang. The ringing sounded different, sharper, heavier, like it knew. I remember Mama answered it, and her voice changed. "We're coming," she said, and then Daddy was already up. He grabbed his coat, and Mama had my baby sister in her arms before I could fully wake. I remember my rag doll clutched in my hands as Daddy drove faster than I'd ever seen, tires crunching gravel as we sped toward my aunt's house, just down the road. That's when I saw the lights. Not headlights, not flashlights. Colors vivid and pulsing like a heartbeat. Red, green, gold, hovering low over the field behind my aunt's house, lighting up the tall pine trees like they were burning from the inside. My baby sister cried. Mama whispered prayers. I couldn't look away. My aunt was screaming outside. Daddy told us to stay in the car. He ran to her. I don't remember how long we watched, just that the air was still but felt wrong. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. A metal disc with colored lights hovered in the sky, smooth and silent, with a dark figure standing beneath it near the trees. The open door on its side glowed, too bright to be real. The dark figure was holding a body, then walked forward and laid the body at the feet of my Uncle Jack. It was Mary Beth, my cousin. She was about 15 years old and had gone missing a couple of nights before. I just remember my parents talking about it in hushed tones the night she went missing. She didn't move. Her limbs hung limp like a rag doll. I remember my aunt screaming over and over, "My baby, my baby." Uncle Jack wasn't in good health, but he stumbled forward like something pulled him. He scooped Mary Beth up in his arms and carried her away from that glowing thing. As soon as he crossed the field, Daddy took Mary Beth from him. The lights blinked out, and just like that, it was gone. Mary Beth didn't talk when they brought her inside. She just stared. She was pale. Her hair was damp and hung in black, wet ringlets. Her mother kept asking what happened, but Mary Beth didn't answer. She never did. Not that night, not the next. Days later, they started taking her to doctors, then specialists. She stopped eating, then talking, then walking. It was like she was there but not in there anymore. Mama said it was Guillain-Barré, some kind of nerve disease. Rare, aggressive, only a handful of cases ever recorded back then. But I remember thinking, no disease takes away your eyes like that. A few months after it happened, a group of men came to the house. I was playing with my toys on the porch. I remember their shoes more than their faces. Shiny black leather, clean in a way nothing ever was in our town. One of them was Mama's boss from Fort Polk. The others were in uniform. They talked to Daddy and Uncle Jack. Nobody said a word after they left. Mary Beth didn't speak again. The doctors came and went, but no one could explain why it started that night, or why Mary Beth, who had been lively and strong, always on the basketball court, seemed like a different person from the moment she came back. Weeks passed, then months. My memories of her after that are quiet ones. Playing with dolls beside her hospital bed, my aunt and uncle had bought to replace her old one, helping her hold tiny china cups in her delicate fingers. Her room was like something from a dream. Lace curtains, ruffled nightgowns, porcelain dolls watching silently from every shelf. But some nights, she would point at the window, her eyes wide, her hand shaking. Mama would hush her and say, "Don't worry, baby, they won't be back." But I saw the fear in her face, in both their faces. Mary Beth lived into her 60s. She never walked again, never spoke again, but she smiled sometimes. She loved her dolls, and every now and then she would glance at the sky with a look I've never forgotten. Once I asked Mama about that night, about the lights. She just said, "It's not your burden to carry. Let it be, but I can't. Because I was there. I saw the lights, I saw her come back, and I saw the silence that followed. People say it was a sickness, bad luck, nerves, but I know better. Something took Mary Beth that night, and what we got back wasn't quite the same." Our next story is Born Cursed, Buried Forgotten. This is how a woman named Elizabeth told me this story when I was about 20 years old, and it has haunted me since. Some folks believe that something lived deep in the piney woods long ago, something born strange and raised in silence, where a forgotten path leads to an old cabin nearly swallowed by time. Most won't speak of him. Some say it was a creature, others that it just a man, sick with a rare curse. Yet, some swear he was something older, stranger, something the woods kept hidden for a reason. They called her Little Granny. Not because of her age, though she was older than most folks dared to guess, but because she barely stood 4'10" in her Sunday shoes. My great-grandmother was a midwife, a healer woman, and maybe something more than that, depending on who you asked in those Louisiana pine woods. Folks came from miles around for her tonics, her poultices, her prayers, when nothing else worked. This happened in the 1930s, back when my grandfather, her son, was about 15 years old. It was a rough time. My great-grandfather had broken his leg weeks earlier when he fell from the porch roof while repairing some damage from a storm. So when the man showed up, riding an old mule, shouting up the hill like he'd seen the devil himself, my great-grandmother didn't even hesitate. He said his wife was in labor, deep in the woods, maybe 5 miles past the river bend. It was her 6th pregnancy. My great-grandmother knew the woman had already lost 4 babies in childbirth, and their toddler had died from pneumonia the year before. The man said this baby had been coming for 2 days, and something wasn't right. The man looked half-starved, eyes wide and wild. My great-grandfather, laid up in bed, tried to stop her. "You're not riding off into those woods alone," he told her, leg propped up on a stack of old quilts. "Take the boy." So my grandfather saddled up and rode behind his mama, rifle slung across his back, down a trail so tangled it barely remembered it used to be a road. He told me later that even the birds went quiet out there. The pine trees stretched so high they swallowed the sun, and the path twisted like it didn't want to be found. They finally reached the cabin. He said it barely deserved the name. Just a few warped boards with moss growing from the roof. No electricity, dirt floor, and from inside, screaming. A woman's voice, raw and ragged, like she was giving birth to something not meant for this world. My grandfather stayed outside with the husband until little Granny came to the door, pale and shaking. "Come help," she told him, now. He had never helped with a birth before, didn't know what to expect. They held the woman down while little Granny pulled the baby out. He said the baby didn't cry. Not at first. It came out large, far too large for a woman so small, and it was covered head to toe in hair, thick, dark, matted hair like a wild animal. Little Granny didn't say much, just wrapped the baby in a ragged quilt and handed it to the father. She whispered something to him, I don't know what, but she turned away fast, back to the mother, who was sobbing. She tended to her, and soon the man came back in alone. On the ride home, my grandfather asked her, "Mama, what was that?" She just looked ahead and said, "It was an abomination." He never forgot those words. He said they weighed heavier than her saddlebags. But the man didn't do what she assumed he would. He didn't kill the child. He raised him. Quietly. In that same cabin, far from town, far from curious eyes. Nobody saw them for years. The woman died young, not long after, folks say. And the man, he kept that boy, what some people would consider a creature, hidden away. Time passed. My grandfather married, had kids of his own, but every now and then things would go missing off the farm. A smoked ham, a sack of potatoes, nothing major, but it always seemed like someone was watching from the edge of the woods. One day, my grandfather spotted him. A man, tall, covered in coarse black hair, lean and hollow-eyed, dressed in ragged clothes, just standing there near the edge of the clearing, watching. He told his mother, who was old by then, but still sharp. She turned white as a sheet, told him to get the horse ready. They rode out, just the two of them, back into those woods toward the old cabin. Grandpa said the hairy man he'd seen at the farm was there. Grandpa's mother, little Granny who helped bring him into the world all those years ago, warned him. "You're scaring people. You need to stay away from folks," she told the hairy man. "They don't trust what they don't understand. If they see you, they will hunt and they will kill you. Do you understand?" From that day on, my grandpa started bringing food to the hairy man that lived deep in the woods, a basket every few weeks. Sometimes it was smoked meat, sometimes vegetables. Nothing fancy, but enough. They never told anyone, not the preacher, not the sheriff, not even their closest neighbors, just kept it quiet, out of compassion or guilt, maybe both. Years passed. Little Granny died. The hairy man stayed in those woods, never spoke a word to anyone but my grandpa. Eventually, the hairy man passed away too, alone, in his cabin deep in those pine woods. But my grandpa, he buried him behind the old cabin next to the parents who raised him. No name on the headstone, just the year he died. Some folks say it was a condition, something we'd have a name for now. Hypertrichosis, maybe. A rare disorder that covers the body in thick hair. Back then, though, they didn't call it that. They just called it unnatural. But other people whispered that he wasn't just born wrong. He was born from something wrong. Something old. Something that lives in the deep parts of the world we don't talk about much. But my family knows the truth, or at least the part we're willing to live with. He was human, and someone loved him, enough to raise him, enough to feed him, enough to give him a place to rest when it was all over. Not every monster is a monster, and not every story has a villain. Some are just born in the wrong time and never asked to be. Have you ever wondered what might live deep in the forests and mountains, far from roads, far from help? This next story comes from a man who worked in the remote wilds of British Columbia. He didn't give it a name, but I'll call it the thing that walks the ridge. I work trail maintenance in northern British Columbia. Not the pretty tourist stuff, the real backcountry. We're talking weeks without cell service, logging roads that wash out halfway up a mountain, and cabins that don't show up on any official registry. I mostly go alone. That's part of the job. You get dropped in with a snow machine and a radio, and they pick you up when the work's done. This happened last February, right before the spring thaw. Still snow on the ground, but the ice was thinning in places. I'd been assigned to clear deadfall from a ridgeline west of Tetza River, not far from an old trapper's cabin we sometimes use for shelter. The area hadn't been patrolled in over a year due to fire risk, so the trail was in rough shape. Snow-blasted pines leaning at strange angles, some snapped clean like they'd been twisted instead of broken. The first 2 days were uneventful. Cold, quiet, the kind of quiet that presses into your ears and makes you hyper-aware of your own heartbeat. I've been doing this kind of work for over a decade. I know what wolves sound like. I know how far a bear will track you. I know when the woods are healthy and when they're hiding something. And that ridge, it felt wrong. There weren't any tracks, not mine, not animals, just wind-sculpted snow, smooth and untouched, like the forest had paused and was waiting for something. The cabin was still standing, barely, slumped to one side, roof bowed with ice, wood grayed from years of storms. I lit a fire inside and hunkered down with my gear. No radio signal out here, just static. That night, I heard footsteps on the ridge, heavy ones, slow, not crunching in the snow, pressing into it like it was sinking under the weight. I killed the lantern and sat there in the dark, listening. They passed behind the cabin, one slow step at a time, then silence. I didn't sleep. Next morning I went outside, no prints, not even mine from the day before. The snow looked smoothed over, like something had wiped it clean. I told myself it was wind and nerves. I worked all day clearing branches and ice, occasionally looking up toward the ridge where the slope met the trees. I didn't see anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. You get used to animals tracking you, but this was different. Not curious, not predatory, just aware, like the woods were holding their breath. The second night, it came back. Same slow, deliberate pacing, from one end of the ridge to the other. This time I heard breathing, deep and wet, like lungs that hadn't drawn air in a long time. It stopped behind the cabin again, right where the tree line thickened. I whispered something out loud, just a prayer or a curse, I don't even remember, and the breathing stopped. Then I heard my own voice repeat it from the woods. Not an echo, an imitation, rough, like someone trying to remember how to speak. It was enough for me to draw my axe and sit with my back to the fire, waiting for dawn. I left the cabin that morning, packed everything into the sled and started down the trail. Didn't care if I finished the work, didn't radio it in, just started driving, fast. But the trail had changed. I don't mean blocked, I mean different. The turns were wrong, the slope steeper. I drove past a stand of trees that didn't exist on the way up. Eventually, I came back to the same ridge, same view, same cabin. The trail was looping. I tried again, and an hour later, I was back at the cabin. I don't rattle too easily, but this whole thing had me rattled. I got my bearings, ate an energy bar, and quickly relieved myself right there. I hit the trail again, certain I could find my way out. But on the third loop, the trail was gone altogether. I made camp off-trail, deep in the brush, and left the fire low. I was rationing fuel at that point. The snow began to fall again, thick and silent. I made a quick shelter of a tarp covered with brush and tried to stay warm. I sat in the dark, trying not to breathe too loud. That's when I saw it. At first, just a silhouette on the ridge. Something tall. Too tall. No coat, no face. Just the shape of a man stretched wrong, limbs too long, neck stiff, standing perfectly upright despite the wind. I had heard people talk about Bigfoot, but this was different, sinister, like you could feel death emanating from it. And then it moved. Down the ridge. Slow, too slow, like it knew I was watching. I don't know how long I sat there, eyes wide, frozen in place inside the pile of limbs I had for a shelter. Finally, after what seemed hours, I blinked, and it was gone. Next morning, I followed the only direction that made sense, downhill, through brush, across frozen creek beds, down into ravines. I didn't care about bearings anymore, just distance. I needed to get away from the ridge. Around midday, I found a ranger cache, a wooden emergency box bolted to a pine with a map, flare gun, and a backup radio. I fired off the flare and hit the distress beacon. The rescue team found me 4 hours later, half hypothermic and rambling about voices and snow without footprints. I didn't care. I was done. I quit 2 weeks later. Now I work park security near Dawson Creek. Lowlands, easy terrain, human problems. But sometimes when I walk the fence line at night, I catch a shape on the ridge in the far distance, just for a second. Still as stone, just watching. And I wonder if I ever really left, or if the thing that walks the ridge followed me down. Are these stories true? Maybe I will let you decide. But there is a point where legend and myth become a reality, because the stories come from somewhere, from something. Everyone has a story, me, you. Sometimes they are told. Sometimes we fear the telling. Do you have a story you want me to tell? Comment below. Thanks for watching this episode of Whispers After Dark. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And be sure to join me next time for another eerie journey into the unknown. Until then, stay curious, stay cautious, and beware of the whispers after dark.